All right, every argument that has been expressed by those who are opposed to the Nigerian Senate's modified version of the Electoral Act, which proposes the manual option as a plan B to real-time electronic transmission of voting results, has been anchored on fears of potential manipulation. They believe and have eloquently said that the integrity of the people's vote must be jealously protected by all well-meaning Nigerians in the build-up to the next elections, during the election proper, and even after the polls, when many people appear convinced that some of the critical institutions of state are deliberately sabotaged by desperate politicians for their own selfish ambition. On this installment of The Morning Show, we shall engage Dr. Sulaiman Barnabas, who is an associate professor of political criminology, to speak about integrity of the people's vote, the process that must be followed to reach a popular and acceptable outcome during elections in Nigeria, what must be done to insulate the electoral process from manipulation, and punishment for electoral malfeasance to serve as deterrence, all of that against the backdrop of the arguments for and against this past week's action of the Nigerian Senate on Electoral Act amendment.
As we move on from that, we plan to speak with Honorable Charles Anyagu, the Delta State Commissioner for Information. We will try to find out, among many things, how much the administration under which he serves has been able to utilize the substantial resources of Delta State to respond to identified gaps in human capacity building, especially in the areas of education, health, and youth unemployment. With all of that sorted, we shall wrap up the show by reviewing top stories that made headlines in today's newspapers across the country. It's going to be all that and more today on The Morning Show. Welcome back to The Morning Show here on Arise News. Former U.S. President Barack Obama has indirectly addressed a racist video posted on President Donald Trump's social media, telling a podcast host that the shame and decorum that once guided public officials is now lost. The offensive video, included in a clip, depicted Obama and his wife Michelle as apes, which drew widespread criticism from Democrats and Republicans. The White House initially defended the video, calling the backlash fake outrage. The post was later blamed on a staff member and deleted. Obama spoke to liberal podcaster Brian Tyler Cohen, who asked the first black U.S. president about the tone of political discourse. Cohen cited Trump's post among several recent controversies.
Just days ago, Donald Trump put a picture of your face on an ape's body. And so again, this is kind of, we've seen the de-evolution of the discourse. How do we come back from a place that we have fallen into?
Well, first of all, I think it's important to recognize that the majority of the American people find this behavior deeply troubling. It is true that it gets attention. It's true that it's a distraction. But, as I'm traveling around the country, as you're traveling around the country, you meet people. They still believe in decency, courtesy, kindness. And there's this sort of clown show that's happening in social media and on television. And what is true is that there doesn't seem to be any shame about this among people who used to feel like you had to have some sort of decorum and a sense of propriety and respect for the office, right? So that's been lost. But the reason I point out that I don't think the majority of the American people approve of this is because ultimately the answer is going to come from the American people. And we just saw this in Minnesota, in Minneapolis.
As expected, that was a very measured response from former U.S. President Barack Obama. As his wife Michelle says, when they go low, we go high. But I think very importantly here, Obama is trying to paint America as a nation that is mostly not racist, a nation mostly that people are decent. And I think he said something very important here in the lack of shame. When lack of shame seems to enter public discourse, when people feel that they do not need to be guided by gentlemanly conversation, by doing what is decent, that it is weak to be decent, as weak to be polite or to be kind, what we do is that we allow an erosion of our cultures and the things that guide us. And I think this is not just for America, but also for Nigeria. I think a lot of times people think that these things happen gradually and over time, but sometimes you can have a catalyst. And I think when it comes to the American right and when it comes to racism in America, we have seen a catalyst in US President Donald Trump, whether it's from his past as a birther or from more recent times with some of the things that he's posted on social media, some of the things he said about Haitians. His anti-racism his racial stance not just goes back to 1970 and the civil rights cases against him, but we've also seen it come up in the policy agendas that he's pushing and in the language that he uses, and of course in the type of people who support him. I expected this type of response from Obama because, of course, he's going to say that most Americans are decent and they're kind people and that they are not racist. But honestly, I think we're seeing an erosion of decency in public discourse and public behavior and what is appropriate across board, not just in America, but also here in Nigeria and also, in Europe.
Absolutely. I mean, last week we spoke about it when that disturbing development, happened. And I remember that, my position was that I hope that Obama was going to, ignore it, given the fact that it shouldn't even, Trump would not surprise anyone as such when it comes to that sort of excesses and indecorum, that is known for. And I think that what Obama has done is vintage, classic Obama, addressing an important issue without trying to dignify it. Not once did he mention Trump in all that he said in that interview with Brian, not once. But then he used that unfortunate incident to, like you rightly said, to highlight the issues that America has always been confronting with, the issue of racism, the issue of political discourse, the dichotomy between the red and the blue states in America, the dichotomy between the values, that the two of them represent. And of course, more importantly, this sort of rhetoric that Donald Trump tends to project. I like the fact that it's drawing attention to what ought to be in political discourse, not just in America, but globally, and how he thinks that majority of Americans, even though majority of Americans who went to the polls in 2024 November voted for Trump, but I like the fact that he's drawing attention to the fact that majority of Americans still believe in decency, and we saw it in in a number of even Republicans who condemned that thing. When the idea of monkeys and apes and stuff, to a black person, whether in America or anywhere in the world, is a touchy subject. And again, as I said, that Obama didn't necessarily, dignify it. He's just saying, let's raise the standard. Let's hope that, better times or the good times will return. But that some other people might also think that as jamming as that might be, maybe there's a bit of sophistry, in what Barack Obama said, given the fact that he was essentially speaking to a liberal podcaster, and who naturally will frame, his questions and the issues that he was raising with Obama in a certain fashion that will be different from if, for example, a conservative person or a conservative journalist would have done. For example, when he also spoke about the issues in Minneapolis and the issues of immigration and deportation, you would expect that a podcaster like Brian, who is a liberal, will refrain from asking certain questions. If other people had interviewed Obama, there are other areas that they would have explored, for example, to say that now that you are condemning Trump, in terms of immigration, and deportations, what ICE is doing, the same Holman who is the henchman for Trump, was decorated by Obama in his own days, in his 8 years as the president. And we recall, of course, that at that time, Obama was also described as the deporter-in-chief, given the fact that in recent history, he actually deported, more people than any other president, I believe, since Clinton. And so when you say that I condemn what is happening in Minneapolis, people will say, but you did the same thing. If you say that 2 people died, people will say that in your 8 years, about 56 people died. Maybe not directly shot by ICE people, but in terms of, how they were dealt with. I'm saying this not to take a position, but to highlight, the division within the American system and what people will point out, depending on which side of the divide you are, if you, whether you're in America or you are outside, because the American politics has become so politicized that, so divided, so divisive that every comment that you make is either you're on this side or you are, or you are on the other side, whether you are discussing immigration, and you see it even in the video that Trump posted that. Yet, many black people, many African Americans, try to rationalize it, try to defend it, and say, and that speaks to the politics that we are currently experiencing in America. As bad as it may be, you need to understand my point, which is not as bad as it may be. People will still read politics into it, because when you say that decency, people will draw attention to the fact that, oh yes, that's fine, we condemn what he has done, but then we'd rather have a president who is bringing God and the Almighty into the discourse, who is bringing family into the discourse, who knows the difference between a man and a woman, into the discourse. Those are the sort of things that is guiding, the commentary about American politics, and we can't deny that. Again, as I said, I commend the way that Obama has responded. And let's hope, of course, that the sort of decency that he preaches will return. But we know Trump. We know Trump, that his successes, Trump and his successes are 5 and 6.
Definitely. I agree with you that American politics has become very polarized and very divisive. And I do think I also agree that fundamentally it's not fundamentally true that conservatives are the ones that are racist and liberals are the ones that are accepting of people of all faiths. And I think for me, when we think about the differences between Obama's deportation or immigration stances in terms of mostly deporting people with criminal records versus Trump potentially just terrorizing communities where he's not popular. I definitely think it's a different way of going about things. It's a different way of speaking about Somalians as people he believed had low IQ. He said he thought they had low IQ until he saw some of the crimes in Minnesota. You can laugh at that, but people who think it's okay to depict other black people as apes or say they believe other people have that some Africans have low IQ, I think that is just telling of some people who have low racial self-esteem, not just conservative values, but there are some people who definitely believe that they are less than white people. And I wouldn't be surprised to see some of those people as Donald Trump fans.